On July 30th, 1975, Jimmy Hoffa mysteriously disappeared. There have been many theories over what happened to him. Did the Mafia kill him? Did he get lost in the woods? Was he kidnapped by the CIA? Or was it actually all an elaborate ruse by the government to protect Hoffa from the mob? Today we're going to break down what really happened to one of the most powerful men in America. James Riddle Hoffa was born on February 14, 1913, in Brazil, Indiana. His father worked at a Ford Motor Company factory, and his mother stayed at home taking care of the family. As a young man, he became heavily involved with the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. After getting a job as a truck driver, he moved up the ranks quickly, too, becoming the president of the local chapter of the union at age 26. During World War II, he served in the Navy before returning to the union. In 1952, he was elected as vice president of the International Brotherhood of Teamsters. And in 1957, he was named president, a position he held until 1967. As president of the union, Hoffa wanted to expand the union's power. But there was one major obstacle standing in his way: the Mafia. The La Cosa Nostra crime family had infiltrated the Teamsters union and were siphoning off millions of dollars every year. Hoffa didn't want to be looked down upon by the criminals, so he fought back. This led to a violent turf war between the Mafia and Hoffa. But Hoffa wasn't just fighting the Mafia within the Teamsters union. He was also battling the federal government. The McClellan Committee was created by the U.S. Senate in 1956 to investigate organized crime's influence on labor unions. They focused their attention on the Teamsters union and Hoffa. A 3-year investigation resulted in the indictment of Hoffa on 86 counts of mail-and wire fraud in 1964. In 1965, he was convicted and sentenced to 13 years in prison. However, while he was appealing the verdict, he continued to run the Teamsters union. President Johnson pardoned him in 1967, but it was short-lived. Hoffa was charged again with jury tampering and conspiracy in 1968. He was found guilty and sent back to prison to serve out the remainder of his original sentence. Once again, Hoffa didn't let this slow him down. He appealed the decision, and in 1971, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned the verdict against him. He went back to work for the Teamsters union, only this time he was put under supervision and required to report to a federal halfway house. It was during this time that he made some powerful enemies within the federal government who were unhappy about being publicly embarrassed. In 1975, President Gerald Ford granted Hoffa a pardon for his past crimes, but the terms of his release prohibited him from working for the Teamsters union or engaging in any collective bargaining activities. By all accounts, Hoffa was a changed man. He told reporters he was through with the mob and wanted to go straight. But some people didn't believe him, including the Mafia. They were furious over Hoffa's betrayal and felt he still had information that could lead to their capture. Others believed that Hoffa wasn't through with the union and would try to take it back. Either way, there were plenty of reasons for the Mafia to want Hoffa dead. And then there were plenty of people in the government who would unshed a tear if the Mafia killed Hoffa. So when Hoffa disappeared in 1975, it didn't take long for the rumors to begin circulating. The last person to see Hoffa alive was his attorney, Frank E. Regano Jr. Regano picked him up from his home around 2:30 p.m. On July 30th, 1975, their first stop was at a restaurant where they met with 2 other attorneys. They talked about various legal matters, including a lawsuit against the Detroit Tigers baseball team. At about 4 p.m., Hoffa excused himself to go to the bathroom. When he didn't return after several minutes, Ron Arnell went to find him. Hoffa wasn't in the bathroom, and he was nowhere to be seen outside the restaurant. Reganano waited another 10 minutes before calling the police to report his client missing. The police investigation turned up nothing. There were no signs of foul play, and no witnesses came forward with any useful information. Within days, the FBI took over the investigation. Since Hoffa had ties to organized crime, for the first few months, the FBI focused on the Mafia's possible involvement in Hoffa's disappearance. They suspected that he may have been killed and buried in a concrete overpass on the New Jersey Turnpike. Other investigators thought he might have been taken to a farm owned by the Genovese crime family in upstate New York. Unfortunately, these theories led nowhere. There was no evidence of foul play, and it seemed unlikely that the Mafia would make such a blunder as leaving behind physical evidence. The next theory was that Hoffa had been kidnapped by a group of unknown assailants. The problem with this theory was there was no ransom demand. Kidnappers usually demand money in exchange for the safe return of their hostage. But whoever took Hoffa wanted more than money. There were rumors that the CIA was involved in Hoffa's disappearance, but there was no evidence to support those claims. The fact was, no one knew what happened to Jimmy Hoffa. For over 40 years, the mystery surrounding Hoffa's disappearance has endured. Theories about his mysterious disappearance continue to this day. Some people believe he's still alive and hiding somewhere under a false identity. After all, there was no physical evidence to prove he was dead. Others think he was killed by the Mafia and his body was never recovered. There are even some people who believe the government had him killed. So what really happened to Jimmy Hoffa? The truth is we don't know for sure. But after reviewing all the evidence, it seems likely that the Mafia was responsible for his death. Just a month before Hoffa disappeared, he was placed under surveillance by the FBI. While the FBI was monitoring him, he made several trips to Chicago, which was known to be a stronghold for the Mafia. He also met with several known mobsters, including Anthony Joe Coloni and Anthony Provenzano. Both of these men had been linked to the murder of Jimmy Rourke. Rourke was a former Mafia hitman who turned government witness in 1970. Hoffner allegedly ordered his assassination because he was upset that Rourke testified against one of Hoffner's close friends. Hoffner was never charged in connection with Rourke's murder, but it certainly didn't look good for him. It's also important to note that Hoffner's relationship with the Mafia was complicated. On one hand, he had spent years fighting to keep the Mafia out of the Teamsters Union. But on the other hand, he had also made some very powerful enemies along the way. Some people believe that the Mafia had sworn revenge on Hoffa, and when he disappeared, it was them who carried out the hit. If this is true, then Hoffa's body was likely hidden in an area where it would never be found, like an acid-filled grave or under the floor of a building. To date, no human remains have ever been found in either of these locations. We may never know what happened to Jimmy Hoffa, but one thing is certain: he was a legend in his own time. He was a powerful labor leader who fought tirelessly for the rights of working people. He was also a skilled organizer and negotiator who helped to secure better wages and benefits for union members. Whether you love him or hate him, there's no denying that Jimmy Hoffa was one of the most influential people of the 20th century. Now check out What Really Happened to D.B. Cooper or watch Weirdest Unsolved Internet Mysteries for more.